Do it.
Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the Mason County Board of Commissioners regular meeting for July 26th. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Can we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner District 1, Randy Netherland.
Here?
Commissioner District 2, Tim Sheldon.
I'm also here.
Commissioner District 3, Terry Jeffries.
Here. Correspondence and organizational business. Can you please report the correspondence received by the Commission?
Sure. Jim Reese, Jim and Milnice Kearns, Ron and Margot Otto, and Jim and Peggy Penny sent letters regarding boating regulations. The Liquor and Cannabis Board sent marijuana license application for Bomar Holdings, a special occasion application for Summit Pacific Medical Foundation, a liquor license application for Skipper John's Seafood, and a list of businesses with liquor and cannabis licenses due to expire within 90 days. The National Association of Realtors sent notification of briefing. The Department of the Navy sent an impact statement, and the EDC sent their second quarter report.
Thank you. Is there any other organizational business to come before the body?
There isn't.
Thank you. Item number 5 is our open forum citizen input. This is an opportunity to address the Commission on any items that are not on the agenda. That includes anything on the action agenda or the public hearing. There will be a separate opportunity to address the Commission on some of those items. If you would like to address the Commission on any items not on the agenda, can you please raise your hand? Ms. Herbacek, please come to the podium, state your name.
Thank you. Mary Jean Herbacek, 60 West Shadow Valley Drive in Shelton. And I had come last week and asked if the Commission was planning on doing a salary review of all the non-represented and the elected personnel. And I saw Commissioner Jeffries in the hallway yesterday when I was trolling about the hallways, and she indicated that it was not on last week's briefing agenda. I'm asking that you put a brief that on the agenda, the salaries. It needs to be done before the budget is submitted, and it obviously won't be from the first round, but it could be included before it gets passed at the end of the year. I also read with some interest today, you can spend hours on the computer just reading or watching the videos provided by Mason Web TV, and the information is provided by the iFiber News. And unfortunately, I tend to read all that stuff. It's a sad way to lead life, but whatever. I read this afternoon about a budget battle bruise. It's a little bit of a tongue twister. Budget battle bruise between Mason commissioners and sheriff over jail costs. I didn't get a chance to watch all of that, but they do have it also on the web, and I encourage people to watch these particular issues that you have some concern about. All the information is available. You don't have to show up at 9 o'clock in the morning to watch it, or at 6 o'clock at night. I have found that to be a tremendous asset to the citizens of this county, and we need to take advantage of it. But it did say that, and just briefly, Sheriff Casey Salisbury offered Mason County Commissioners the task of county jail operations, saying he's tired of budgetary micromanagement and criticism coming from the commissioners. Let's see, blah, blah, blah. He says, he basically said, the sheriff said he wrote a July 1 letter to the commissioners in light of the upcoming budget and potential outcomes that will result. Is a copy of that letter available for the citizens to read?
Always.
And where would it be, Commissioner?
You would make the request from Julie Almanzar, our
as a freedom of information or whatever you call it?
Public disclosure.
Okay. Asked if the commissioners could take over the jail operations, Commissioner Randy Netherland said, quote, the commission is not asking for that, unquote. Netherland said the sheriff's comments were intended to, quote, intimidate the commission, unquote. He's trying to force us with what he's done in the past, which is to try to spend $500,000 without going to the commissioners, unquote. I worked for the sheriff for 4 years. When people get sick at the end of the year, you get a guy that has a heart attack and they have to take him up to Mason General and then farm him out someplace else, you're stuck. And it's a non-debatable, which is something that needs to be recognized, and it's not something that you can predict. None of you know how you're going to be feeling 3 months from now. So I'm a little frustrated that non-debatables are even a subject for a supplemental or even a year end. It's just something that you have to, frankly, bite the bullet. I'm sorry, that's not a good term, is it? But the last thing is, and I had done some work until this particular, the sheriff asking the commissioners to take over the budget for the jail, which I think would be really interesting. And if you haven't spent a weekend there as a guest of the jail, you could certainly spend a few nights there in the control room. It's a very interesting experience, and I think it's one that would give you a real appreciation for the job that the jailers are doing and the job for which Casey is responsible. However, having said that, and I still would like to see the salary review done, there's an article recently in the Kitsap Sun. Poulsbo hopes bigger salary will help woo quality police chief. The city council in Poulsbo on Wednesday, and it was sometime this month, approved an annual salary range of between $135,000 to $142,000, and that's for a Poulsbo city chief. Clearly, he doesn't have the range, he doesn't have the number of people, he doesn't have the responsibilities that a county sheriff has, and certainly not our county sheriff. My recommendation to Casey, if I were his financial manager, or his mother, or his wife, would be to tell him to jump on that job. And then, I don't know, if he were to leave, and he certainly could, he had an interview this morning on iFiber Radio, and talking about the different things that he's been doing regarding school safety and some other things. I don't think people realize how much goes on that the sheriff's office and this particular gentleman have been doing over the past 10 years. And it's a shame he's not being recognized for it by the commissioners, at least in the form of a salary that is commensurate with not just the job responsibilities, but with his performance, which has been nothing short of outstanding. I think that it's time that the commissioners sit down and do an honest look, and it needs to be done before the end of this year. Thank you.
One clarification for iFiber, I called in.
Excuse me, Commissioner.
Excuse me?
Yes.
I'm allowed to speak.
No,
Mr.
this
Budget.
is,
Mr. Butchick, I'm
Mr.
allowed to
Budget,
speak.
please allow him to speak.
As a clarification for iFiber News, I did call them afterwards to explain I did not believe that he was trying to dump the jail on it, that it was a different scenario that he wanted to take for a piece of that budget. That was the clarification I made with iFiber. The fact they didn't put it on, I don't know what to say, but I'll check that with him later, but you can check that with him as well. I did call.
Is this opinion to the citizens?
Thank you.
2 minutes that
Thank
we
you.
get? Excuse me.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
could I just make a comment?
please.
Well, thank you. Sorry, Mr. Herbachet left because I want to just comment on the non-debatable issues. And the non-debatable are costs that we just incur. I mean, medical costs and some of the other things we just have to pay. I don't know the word non-debatable is very good, but at least it's describes some of the action that happens with that. With those costs. And I suggested as a compromise, because I think the other, between the commission and the sheriff's office, is that we list those non-debatable costs each month, just like we list our salaries and other warrants that are paid and invoices that are paid to our other vendors. And so we keep track of it each month, and the public has a good idea of how much we have in obligations. These are accounts payable. They're to the Nisqually Jail, for example. They're to Mason General Hospital. They're to EMS transport, those types of things. And I think if we listed them each month, I think it would give the public a better understanding of those costs, and maybe we could become more current with them instead of waiting and then having a supplemental budget or supplemental budget request that's very, very large and pushes our expenditures up in a dramatic way. So that's just one suggestion I had.
Yeah, and I appreciated that suggestion, and our budget manager had asked me how to operationalize that, and I think that you two need to sit down and have that discussion in more detail.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty simple concept, account payable. You put it down and you keep track of it, so be happy to do that. And
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to address the commission at this time? Sir?
Good evening. My name is Josh Kyle. I'm actually a resident of Tacoma, 613 North Union Avenue. I am here representing a group of individuals that comprise of historians, tourist railroad professionals, etc. I'm actually here to try to ask the the county commission to help support the city of Shelton in their continued efforts to try to acquire the Simpson Railroad roundhouse and right-of-way. It would be very positive for the community and the county as a whole to try to acquire these properties and institute a tourist railroad and museum. It is, using some facts and figures, state of California, they figure a multiplier for every dollar spent at a tourist venue to be 2.56. That is for every dollar spent at a tourist venue. You can expect $2.56 per every dollar spent inside the local community, inside the economy. So if we had a tourist railroad here, which could offer in the neighborhood of 20,000 riders per year, that's almost $400,000. That would put roughly $1 million into the local economy. I think that would be very, very beneficial, especially with the loss of both the Simpson and the Olympic Panel Mills. The good news about this is that it's going to be very little, next to no cost to the city and the counties, especially if we have a nonprofit organization that would take over the operation of the museum and railroad. We do have several individuals that are already in the planning stages of forming a nonprofit organization, which if we had that, we'd also have money spent on supplies and materials, that type of thing, which we would spend locally as best as we could. And we'd also be providing jobs, volunteer opportunities, educational opportunities, recreational opportunities. The list is potentially limitless as far as what we could do with this thing. And I just hope that the county can take this into consideration and hopefully get some extra support from you guys.
Mr. Keisel, may I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
We've obviously been looking at this, talking to very interested parties on this, and one of the issues that we keep running up against is in order to have a tourism-related railroad, you would probably need a destination that was attractive and where people would want to go. And so currently the rail line goes to where what was formerly Mill 5. And as beautiful as that area is, I don't know that it has the tourism attraction piece. So then there was discussion about going all the way up to the formerly used Vance Creek Bridge Trail rail line, which has been removed, which would need to be replaced. And I was told by somebody else looking at this project that there's an estimated cost of $6 million just to replace the lines, and then individuals from Green Diamond who will probably take over that line indicated there was a lot of sloughing off in some of the steeper areas, and so then there's retrofitting. And so when you say it's a low-cost way to provide that kind of cost, I was curious whether you had looked into those very issues yourself.
Well, okay, so let me preface this by saying that not every tourist railroad has to have a destination. There are some railroads that operate very successfully with a centralized museum core, and then a train ride's kind of an accessory to that. The California State Railroad Museum, for example, we have a centralized museum in the historic Old Town District, and it kind of runs down along the river, kind of along the backside of the highway, and not even that ride's not very scenic. It gets you behind a steam engine, but at the end of the day, it's not necessarily a destination ride, but the museum itself as a whole is a destination.
I see, okay.
So that's kind of the way to look at it. And I mean, yeah, Vance Creek is neat, but my personal professional opinion, I don't see that being a viable destination option. I mean, it would be neat if maybe Mill 5 site could be reutilized as a fairgrounds or maybe even in a small industrial park or something like that. And you could run commercial trains, freight trains, in conjunction with the tourist operation. Strasburg Railroad in Pennsylvania, they operate freight as well as passenger traffic.
And that would be dependent on a commercial entity going into that site at Mill 5 then?
That would be a possibility, yes. But the tourist railroad itself could be operated by a nonprofit organization and could be self-sustaining and could also catalyze other tourist type growth in the local economy.
I appreciate your comments, Mr. Keisel. I just want to share with you, you are probably aware there's competing requests for the use of that line, one being a trail
Yes.
that would accommodate bikes as well as hikers, as well as railroads, so.
Yeah, I am aware of that, and that's
Okay,
why
that's
I
why
felt,
you're
I felt
here.
the need to come
Okay,
down here
thank you.
and try to make my arguments clear. And,
I appreciate
and
that.
At the same time, I am currently working on a proposal to further delve into the feasibility of having a self-sustaining, nonprofit-run tourist railroad. That should be hopefully being presented at the next city meeting on August 1st.
Can I ask a question, Madam Chair?
Please.
You mentioned the city. I know the city, I believe the city was the funding base for the consulting firm that's looking at the Roundhouse, Simpson Roundhouse. Mrs. Thompson's been doing that. I don't know if there's any report yet out. Have you seen anything?
Yes, Mary Thompson from Architects did have a feasibility report presented. I believe that was a little over a month ago. And the numbers I felt were rather exorbitant and much more than what they needed to be. And some other professionals that I have discussed this with also feel that the numbers they're way out of reach for what just needs to happen to get this thing going.
So that report's out. Great, thank
That
you.
report is out, yes.
Commissioner, do you have anything? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to address the commission at this time? Okay, hearing none, we will move on. I just want to also share with the commission, I haven't had a chance to talk to you in the briefing session, but this is an open public meeting on that very topic. I was requested to consider, have us consider putting .09 monies, which is monies, a rebate of sales tax, 0.09% of the sales tax collected in the county, of the state's portion, that's rebated back to the state or to the county for purposes of economic development and infrastructure for economic development. It was requested that we allocate a certain amount of money, that somebody's going to give me that amount for a feasibility study of a trail, as opposed to a rail line, but more importantly of potentially creating a commercial hub at the Mill 5, so that one could, if we did go with the trail from the city of Shelton to the Mill 5 site, and then you'd have this hub there of perhaps outdoor recreation, outfitters, etc., and then they could move on to a trail all the way up to Vance Creek Bridge. So I will be talking to you about that when we get to the budget setting. So that takes us on to item number 6. This is the adoption of the agenda.
Madam Chair, I move for the adoption of the agenda as presented.
I'll second the motion, Madam Chair.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye, motion carried. Item number 7 is the approval of the minutes.
Madam Chair, we have a set of briefing minutes to approve today. I would move their approval. They're from July 11th, 2016.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the July 11, 2016 briefing meeting minutes as presented. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye, motion carried. Item 8 is our action agenda, approval of the action agenda. There are 6 items on the action agenda. The intention is that we would vote on them all in one vote and approve them. We will read through each of those items, and there's an opportunity for members of the audience here or the commission to ask any questions they have on any of the items. Members of the audience, as well as the commission, also have the option to ask that any of these items be removed for separate discussion, testimony, and vote. So first, we'll read through, and then I'll ask if anybody has questions. Commissioner Sheldon, would you please read items 8.1 and 8.2? Commissioner Netherland, 8.3 and 8.4, and I will finish with 8.5 and 8.6.
All right, Madam Chair. 8.1 is approval of the Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, between Mason County Public Health and Human Services and United Way of Mason County as to the role and responsibilities and acceptance of a 2016 Community Impact Grant. 8.2, approval to set a public hearing on Tuesday, August 16, 2016, at 9:30 a.m. to consider repealing collective gardens, Mason County Code Section 17.09, as an allowed land use in Mason County.
Madam Chair, item number 8.3, approval of the Veterans Assistance Fund applications for necessity items, $258.71, utilities, $1,219.16, driver's license / ID, $54, and housing, $668.46, for a total of $2,200.33 as recommended by the Veterans Service Office. Item number 8.4, approval of the resolution allowing current expense departments to transfer up to $15,000 annually between salary and benefit expenditure budget lines and operating expenditure budget lines without commission approval. The Sheriff Office is allowed to an annual transfer amount up to $50,000. The transfer will not change the department's budget totals.
Item 8.5, approval to set a public hearing on Tuesday, August 16, 2016, at 9:30 a.m. to receive public comment on the private line occupancy permit for a water line at 10238 West Matlock Brady Road for the Nelson Family Trust. And finally, 8.6, approval of Amendment 9 to Consolidated Contract C17118, amending Drinking Water Group A program by adding a requirement to record 2 GPS data points when performing a sanitary survey, and provide $6,000 to the Recreational Shellfish Program. Is there anybody in the audience that has any questions on any of the items just read? Please.
I'd like to ask about item number 8.4 as to why we're amending the budget adoption resolution.
Okay.
Madam Chair, could I just move to have that 8.4 set aside for a separate vote, then we could hear people's opinion about it.
Will that suffice, Chief
Oh,
Eric?
that's fine. Yeah, I just want to know the rationale for. Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question on any of the items? Would anybody like any items besides item 8.4 removed for a separate vote?
Madam Chair, just if there's nobody from the audience,
I don't.
8.2, just a question. I see Barbara's here today. The collective gardens, that would be removed because of state law?
Yeah.
Because of changes in state law?
Yes, they've done away with collective gardens.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, I move for the approval of the action agenda, except for item number 8.4, which will be removed for a separate vote.
Second motion, Madam Chair.
It's been moved and seconded to approve all the items on the action agenda except item 8.4, which will be voted on separately. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye, motion carried. Item 8.4, approval of the resolution allowing current expense departments to transfer up to $15,000 annually between salary and benefit expenditure budget lines and operating expenditure budget lines without commissioner approval. The Sheriff's Office is allowed an annual transfer amount of up to $50,000. The transfers will not change the department's budget total. Mr. Pinter, would you like to present this item?
Thank you, Commissioners. So the item is a request to modify the adoption language in the resolution for last year's budget, which adopted the budget on 2 bottom lines, one for salaries and benefits and one for operations. That was a restriction that the Commissioners put on the budget, in that anybody moving dollars between an operational cost and a salaries and benefits cost would submit a request to the commission to make that transfer. There is no public hearing required. That transfer can be made in a briefing and then adopted at a hearing or at a meeting. The electeds and the sheriff had asked that there be an automatic mechanism put into the adoption of that language to transfer some dollar amount without having to come back to the commissioners, authorizing the budget manager to do that based on some limit of authority. And this is an attempt at coming up with a mechanism to do just that. So that $15,000 for current expense departments is authorized for the budget manager to transfer between one of the salary and benefits lines and or the operational, and for the sheriff's office, it authorizes $50,000.
Please.
And the reason why it doesn't have to come back for a budget, for an actual hearing, because we're doing the budget adjustment right here by creating that line, and they won't
Correct.
have to.
That's the modification in the adoption language, which authorizes the budget manager the authority to make that transfer without having it go to the commission.
And the bottom line doesn't change.
The overall bottom line does not change. That would require a public hearing and a supplemental request, and that's a much longer process.
Question? Thank you, Madam Chair. Just try to illustrate this in my mind. Let's take two elected officials, the coroner and the sheriff. So the coroner would be allowed to transfer between those operating and expenditure budgets $15,000. What percentage of their budget would they be able then to move?
1 second. That would be almost 6%, 5.9.
Okay, so let's call it 6%. And then how about the sheriff's office? Of course, that would be 50.
Depending on which department, but if you took their biggest department,
$50,000 would be how much as a percentage?
would be less than 0.7. I'm sorry, would be 0.8.
So less than 1%.
Correct.
Okay. Well, that's one of the things I think is wrong with this. Is I think if you're a larger department, well, we can talk about it later.
Yeah,
but-
let's do that
but
in
If there's other questions,
discussion.
someone else can ask some.
Would they still be able to transfer other funds above this by using a request?
Sure. It's just a function of asking for a request to transfer, and no longer does the budget manager have the authority to make the transfer. It would need to come through a briefing and enacted upon at a commissioner meeting.
So the resolution that's being considered actually has the language, whereas budget transfer requests that exceed the above amounts shall be made on an approved budget transfer form to the Board of Commissioners for consideration and approval. Does anybody in the audience have any questions? Thank you very much. Does anybody in the audience like to testify on this issue? Okay, then we will move for either a motion or discussion.
Okay, I asked an earlier question, I was waiting for the item to be removed, and I wanted to clarify some things, if possible. Actually, I wanted to ask why we were considering a resolution to change the way that we adopted the budget. We never asked for that as a department. I heard earlier you referenced budget manager that we have asked, or somebody had, and Sheriff's Department has not, because as this is written, and as our budget was adopted as the only elected
Can
official.
you please state your name?
My name is Teresa Eric.
And this is just for the record, not all of us
Okay.
know you.
I live at 20 East Susan Place.
No,
All the brick for 32 years.
Thank you,
Okay.
thank you.
So I just am asking, I asked a question earlier as to why we were doing this, because if we adopt the budget, of course, we can't change the totals unless we do an amendment or a supplemental and have a hearing process. So that goes without saying. I'm really aware of the laws and how this is done. So the amount that we are asking to change our budget of almost 14 million at 6% like the coroners would be about 600,000. And it doesn't it doesn't make sense to me. That's why I asked the question earlier about a few weeks ago, we had all the commissioners discuss this. And Commissioner, I was going to say Senator Sheldon, Commissioner Sheldon asked about, and he had other elected officials that also brought up, do this if they had to by percentage, but that they were frustrated with the way that the budget was adopted because it did not allow those elected officials to operate their departments as they know and they're the experts at taking care of. So I asked the question earlier as to why we were even considering doing this.
Would you
Please.
then, I can answer.
Please.
Okay, one of the original conversations that occurred, first of all, what I remember is, I remember the sheriff's department having that comment you made, but I don't remember the other ones making it. But I did talk to Karen, her, and others who felt that they were having issues, though, with the two bottom lines, with, for example, $14 might be $14 short. And if they're $14 short, they don't want to be over budget. So they need a flexibility to move that little bit that they're short. The number that we picked was arbitrary to give enough room to move different things that might be necessary, that might be larger than what they were foreseeing, just to be on the safe side. And the actual thing they came up with, we owe a great deal of thanks to Paige because she basically helped us make work from the auditor's office. But that's why this happened, or this was brought up in the first place. And actually, there was also a conversation with the undersheriff over coffee where he expressed a need to be able to move some monies around. That was before I even had a conversation with the auditor, and also Chief Sperling was there.
That had to do with getting equipment for a deputy that we had assigned, and we did not have equipment, and we were asking about when we did have a chance to hire that, they didn't have equipment to use. But the way this is written, you still have to go through a briefing and a commissioner process, which is the same as you do for the other budget amendments, and for the amount of latitude as far as in our budget, that it's a 0.004% over 13.7 million. It doesn't really, I know that I heard all the elected officials on June 29th, and I read the minutes, I got those today, and it didn't really reflect what the meeting was about. But there is a video recording of that meeting, and it does accurately state that the elected officials were frustrated with the way that their budget, with the way they had to manage their affairs in their offices. And yes, while most elected officials are 800,000 or 13 people or 12, we have a really large operation, and that's why I think sometimes it's really easy to discuss how much the budget is for the sheriff's office. None of the items that we spend and do are not without contracts or without negotiated CBAs or benefits that the commissioners have approved, but yet when our budget goes up, just the CBA alone is $300,000 a year, and then the outsourcing could be almost $1 million. We get put out there that we're just spending money like crazy, and the taxpayers don't think that we're having integrity and care about the way that our budget is managed, and that is not true. In fact, our budget, when you look at the financials of the county, you look at the actual expenditures that our finance manager puts to the state auditors, and they're the ones that audit that every year, and they even express their frustration with the way that our operation, we asked for budget amendments in 14 that we didn't get, in 15 that we didn't get, and in 16 we tried to be diligent and brought forward the issues we have with the fact that we have $300,000 in outsourcing and have already paid $400,000 through April, and yes, we do have the amounts we have estimated and brought those forward, and we can easily give that to the commission every month, but that still doesn't change the fact that our budget only has a threshold, and it's a budget authority that our sheriff is constantly struggling with because he is personally responsible and liable for his budget. And if he doesn't have enough to operate with, and it's been brought forward in the budget process last year, we put our budgets together in July. We didn't even discuss and start deliberating them until the end of November, and they were adopted the 1st of December. We did carefully and thoughtfully and detailed put forth to the commission what it takes to run the public safety operation of 110 people. And yet our budget was adopted, not as the roads, as one department of 57 people, with 8 million operating and about 10 million in construction contracts. We have 14 million, 110 people, as adopted by 7 divisions. And so what's happening now is even with our traffic division, if they put in their time and it should come out of the appropriate traffic division, we have to take it out of patrol because we don't have the budget authority to do that. And that isn't the proper way we should be accounting for the traffic efforts and the county's resources, the taxpayers' money.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to testify, please? Please come to the podium, state your name.
Jim Barrett, Undersheriff, Wood County. Since Commissioner Netherland brought my name up over the meeting we discussed, this beginning at the beginning of the year, and it had to do with our ability to utilize discretionary funds for exigent circumstances, among other things. And it was predominantly revolving around the boat issue that we had to replace equipment. Years past, prior to these budget issues, we were able to take money, buy the equipment necessary, either through unused wages or benefits or other things that we needed to fulfill the mission. So there was the concern that the briefing process, and this stems from a timeline from a boat that we were trying to purchase through the Government Services Administration, in which there was a timeline because other agencies had bid for that same boat. Our process for briefings, be able to place it on the agenda, to have that meeting, we lost the boat because of that process. Had we had that discretionary ability, we would be able to pick up that boat, and we wouldn't have lost that delay in the ability to place that boat in the water. So that was one illustrative example of the discretionary ability that was lost. This was an attempt to correct that for the elected officials as their operations see fit under certain situations to fix an issue. But the way this resolution is proposed, and I think the percentages is key, we run a $14 million. We are open 24/7, 365. But yet, we're at 0.004 of discretionary ability, where other offices are anywhere from 2.25% up to 6%, who are open Monday through Friday, weekends and holidays off. And since we have the multiple departments, patrol being a 4 million plus operation, or 5 million, corrections being another one of those, etc., that discretionary authority in each one of those departments, I think, is critical, because each one of them have exigent circumstances that arise during the year that we have to make expenditures on. And the one that is present here is hiring. It now costs us to send people to the academy where it didn't before, the Law Enforcement Academy in Buren. It now costs us more money to background. We are backgrounding a multitude of candidates. And many are washing out, and we're not able to fill those positions. We have, as an example, just about expended those hiring lines. By a sheriff having the discretion, or any elected official having the discretion, to move money to cover certain things like that, it simplifies the issue. And if the commission was being fair in their application, they would say a percentage for each elected official based on your budget to operate as the subject matter experts elected by the citizens to operate those issues. So that's where I would request the commission reevaluate that and make it as a percentage of each elected official's budget, because each mission is different for each person.
Sheriff, may I ask you a question? You have aside from, we have two bottom lines. We have bottom lines for budget, for wages, so wages should go to wages. Bottom line for your maintenance operation, the rest of it, so that you still have the bottom line to move within that. How much is that of the 14 million? About 3.8, 3.7 million?
Without having the documents in front of me, I wouldn't be able to give you a clear answer on
Our
that.
payroll's 10.5
Yeah.
million.
And the ability to the moving of the funds, and what you still have bottom line authority and be able to move. How much was the boat we just purchased? Was it 20?
The original boat was...
This one we just
Yes,
purchased?
the boat that is in the fleet was $25,000, and we had another $30,000 in motors.
30,000.
Okay, then we had another $10,000 to $12,000 in upfitting for electronics, wiring. I believe the total price tag is in the area of $70,000 for the boat, but this is a $250,000 boat.
I'm not
so
questioning that. My question is how did you fund it?
How did we fund it?
Yeah, how did you-
We
how did-
utilized our boating fund dollars, which by our budget process was earmarked for wages and benefits. So we now have the issue of needing to go back and fulfill the dollars that were put in there for wages and benefits to operate the boating programs during the summer months, that money had to be utilized to pay for the boat.
And I appreciate that. But my question to you is, you said we lost a boat because we didn't do anything. We didn't change something. We didn't change it, and you bought a boat. You bought the same type of boat that you were looking at the first time. And my point is there are ways that you still are able to operate. We didn't cut you off at the feet.
And but for the good graces and the good fortunes and luck of GSA, we were able to find that boat in a timely manner, being able to get it on the water. That was a luck.
No, I agree. But that, again, the funding, we didn't do anything separate from the commission. We didn't change or shift any money or anything. You did it within your ability to do it.
Quite frankly, we did it without coming over and asking permissions. We did it anyway to come back and ask for forgiveness because mission capability and putting a boat on the water was the proper thing to do for the citizens, not wait for another process to have hearings to do what was right. So quite frankly, I'll say right here, we went ahead and sped it without asking that time around because 2 previous times we had tried to get permission through either jet skis or other issues and the process bogged down. So we went ahead and did it because it was the right thing to do on behalf of the citizens.
And you asked for separate monies, not out of any of the budget transfer for the jet skis and for the boat originally. You came and asked for specific
We asked for a supplemental and it was
additional
denied.
budget. It gets confusing to the people out here to realize that we're not talking about the same thing. You're talking about asking for cash or budget transfer, 2 different things.
The first time, we weren't able to do it under the new process. The second time, we asked for a supplemental for the jet skis and the boat, which was denied. The third time this came up, we went ahead and did it because it was the right thing to do. And it was
Thank you.
outside the scope of the current directive.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to testify on this matter? Hearing that, I'll close the testimony portion. Please.
My name is Barbara Terabocha, and I live up at Lake Cushman, and I was here for the hearing that's later.
We still haven't had that.
Yes, I know.
Oh.
But this just prompted me to mention the idea about using jet skis. A lot less expensive, they're a lot sneakier, and they can catch up on the people on the lake that are misbehaving. So if there was ever any question about whether or not jet skis are an advantage, definitely.
Just, you know, I agreed with you on that, and I wanted them. I asked for them.
Oh,
It
okay.
just doesn't always happen that way.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to testify on this issue? Okay, now I can close the public hearing, or the hearing on this issue. Commissioner deliberation and/or a motion.
Well, Madam Chair, I agree very much with the undersheriff. I think this, if approved, is another example of micromanagement of elected officials, and I think it causes bad feelings. It causes acrimony and a waste of time. I suggested twice in our meetings with all the elected officials, and then once in briefings, that if we were going to do this, that we do it by percentage. If you have a $14 million budget, a percentage of that could be moved internally. If you have a $250,000 budget, well, your percentage would be also fair. But no, it's up to $50,000 for the sheriff, which is much less than 1%. So I think this, if it passes, is just going to engender more micromanagement and more bad feelings and more animosity and back and forth with the sheriff's office and the elected officials. So I'm not going to vote for it, and I hope that we can reconsider this, bring it back, and make it something that elected officials agree with, and that we can all kiss and make up.
Well, again, if we didn't pass this, then they don't have that flexibility. What am I missing? Right, this creates a flexibility to utilize that. What am I missing? How does this?
It
make
creates
harder?
very little flexibility for the sheriff's office, and when you have a budget that large, a $50,000 transfer is a very, very small percentage. As Teresa says, you're paying, what, $10 million in salaries a year? $10.5 million in salaries a year. $50,000 is a tiny tiny percentage.
Well, and Commissioner, you do understand this is for the incidentals and stuff. They still can transfer monies by going through an actual budget process. They still have the bottom line authority on the monies that they have. You do understand that, right?
I understand.
Did we miss
I
that, or-
understand, Commissioner, but I believe that this is a gross micromanagement of the electeds, and it's a waste of time. Let's get down to business and get along.
Again, so we don't want to give them
opinion.
this money, the flexibility on this.
My opinion, this does nothing. This may sound good, but it does nothing, and I'm not going to vote for it. Thank you.
Any further deliberation?
No.
Okay, well, just for consideration. Commissioner Sheldon, you had made the request that we consider an option, a second way, a different option. And after some studying how to operationalize your request, we had a briefing scheduled to discuss the issues and the problems, and you were not there to be able to help provide guidance to the staff. One of the issues was we had very smart people trying to come up with a way that how could we now track multiple different line item differences of transfer authority. That was one of the major issues. And then how do you set the percentage for the varying levels? And that was another one. And it would have been nice to have your direction. So Commissioner Netherland and I were not the ones making the proposal, and so we could not speak to your needs and what you had hoped to do. So we determined that let's just go to the original proposal because we didn't have your input on it. And we didn't have a way to operationalize it in a way that was not going to create an undue burden on our finance department. So that is the explanation on that piece. I believe that what your objection to is not this resolution. Your objection is the two bottom line budget that was adopted. And I'm not going to talk about your objection to that as much as this is an opportunity to create or allow flexibility to the departments as was requested. The level of flexibility, et cetera, probably would always be under question by each one of the different elected officials and department heads. And so I think this is a no-win situation as far as how to create enough flexibility for everybody. Just a flat percentage or varying percentage was too difficult to operationalize. If you perhaps had another opportunity to speak to the staff outside of the briefing and help them come up with something that would operationalize that would have been helpful.
Well,
I'm sure if he does have conversations with staff and they come up with a formula, I'd be more than happy to listen to it as well. But again, this was also the recommendation of staff when it came faced with the idea of doing percentages. Not to do the percentages because it wasn't workable with what they had or were able to follow through on and to follow up on, keep track of.
Well, in two meetings with all the elected officials, everybody seems to be in that room was in agreement that it would be better to do a percentage than it would be to an actual number. So that's all I'm going to say.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, I move for the approval of resolution allowing current expense departments to transfer up to $15,000 annually between salary and benefit expenditure lines and operating expenditure lines without commissioner approval. The sheriff's office will be allowed an annual transfer amount of up to $50,000. The transfer will not change the department's budget totals.
I'll second that motion. It's been moved and seconded to approve the resolution allowing current expense departments to transfer funds as stated in the motion. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any nays?
No.
Motion carried. Thank you. That takes us to our public hearing. This is a public hearing that was continued to consider amendments to the Mason County Voting Regulations, Mason County Code, Chapter 9.04. Is there staff assigned to present this item? Thank you. Diane Zorn, Administrative Services Manager for the Department of Support Services.
There's quite a few people on it.
Okay. If there are people that want to testify on this or waiting for this portion, please take a moment. We'll take a moment and allow you to come on into the room. And then if you did want to testify, if you could do me a favor of signing in, and we'll start with calling names on the sign-in sheet. Thank you. Are there more? Should we wait?
There's a few.
Commissioners, do you mind waiting while they all sign in
I do
and
not
come in?
mind. So there is no 904.
Diane, did you put anything in the book that I had?
Yes, you did.
Where did
I did, I emailed yours, but I can give it to you.
Okay.
Diane, is there a 904-130, or is he asking to create the whole line?
Just to add,
I don't have it.
I didn't put it in that document, it's just on that one.
Okay, so is there a 904-130 in this document?
Yes.
And it says everything except for what's highlighted red and,
Yes, and his language is the underlined.
I don't see a 130.
no, that's why I was asking her.
Oh, it's a new section.
No, she says it's the same section.
There is no 130
She-
in
Yeah,
our,
I don't have it in mine, but she said,
maybe you were referring to another. Okay.
oh, okay, that makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
His language is just the different. Okay.
There's a lot of different words.
Okay, thank you. Diane, why don't you present this item,
Okay.
please?
Diane Zorn, Support Services. So tonight is a continued hearing from June 21st to consider amendments to the Mason County voting regulations. There have not been any major changes to this code since 1988. At the June 21st public hearing, many of the public comments were opposed to increasing the distance from shore to 200 feet, which is one of the suggested changes. Many of the changes are just to bring it up to, so it's in line with the state regulations. And for reference, Jefferson, Thurston, and Pierce County regulations do require 200 feet from shoreline if the speed is in excess of 5 miles per hour. In King County, it is unlawful to water ski within 100 yards or 300 feet of shore. Also included in this latest draft is language, it's addressing wake surfing. This was suggested just last week. And this would add a section for wake surfing. If a boat is equipped for wake surfing or has a ballast system that displaces the wake to one side of the boat, the operator shall displace the wake away from shore while traveling counterclockwise.
I thought we requested to put that to 150 everywhere.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Diane? Are there any questions from the audience for Diane? These would be questions, not testimony.
Why was that one thing added?
The wake
Because
surfing?
We all spoke about it earlier, all had a big meeting about it, and then we wanted to continue, and basically, in my mind, I thought we were going to talk about exactly the same thing. And then we come in here, now we'll have this and add in, let's change the ballast and all that. Now are we going to have another meeting during the day to talk about the people that missed, they came to the first meeting, but now they didn't get to talk about the ballast change.
Okay,
Confusing me, but I am kind of...
okay,
Supposed to be a continuance.
okay. And that does not preclude us from making proposed changes to the original one that was made, because we did hear testimony. And following last week's meeting, or the last hearing on this issue, Deputy Ryan Sperling came up and made this suggestion. And so we wanted to put this in for consideration.
Can I ask, who's creating this complaint? Who wants to change this?
So, for clarification, did you want to
No, that's
address that for clarification. For clarification, there were significant changes in the state voting regulations, and our county voting regulations were not up to date. There had been independent, I couldn't tell you who, but there had been independent complaints about the destruction of bulkheads due to the wakes that high speeds create on the water. And it was suggested at some point, some level by individuals to increase the distance to help mitigate the damage of the wakes. I think the who piece is probably not as important as how many people support one versus another.
Was there an environmental impact done based on 150 versus 250?
There was not.
So there's no engineering behind it?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you. So we will open the public hearing for testimony, and I have in front of me a list of people who had actually signed in.
Have they seen, they may have the other one, but have they seen Commissioner Sheldon's?
Commissioner Sheldon, did you want to address your proposed, and that would allow people an opportunity
I
to
don't know
also
that they even
testify on
have
that.
one.
I apologize.
Yeah.
I should have provided this opportunity earlier.
Sure. Madam Chair, thank you. As you go through these hearings and you have continuation, so what we try to do, what I do anyway, is I try to listen and hear the testimony and come up maybe with a compromise or something that would fit for what I heard. And what I heard in the first round of testimony is some people that were on Phillips Lake or some of the smaller lakes had different concerns than people that were obviously on larger lakes. So one of the ideas that I had was keeping basically the distances from structures and from shore on the small lakes, leaving that the same as it is now, but on the larger lakes, increase, and those two being Mason Lake and Lake Cushman, increase that by 50 feet.
So the language changes would say, under section 9.04.130 under speed regulations, are we adding the language permanent structure?
I know
We already did.
Yeah,
So,
we did.
and again, during briefing in between, it was identified that we should probably make this clear that these mile per hour speed limitations would not only be within 100 feet of a swimmer, also within 100 feet of a permanent structure. There were multiple speed limits, many of them at 6, and then we had one at 10, and we had wanted to take a look at making them all 10 miles per hour, those speed regulations, during the sunset in the morning time period, after sunset in the morning time period, and within 300 feet of a boat launch. And then Commissioner Sheldon is offering language here to have the, within 100 feet from the shore of any body of water, any speed capable of creating a harmful wake, but in no event a speed excess in excess of 10 miles per hour. However, on only Mason Lake and Lake Cushman, the distance shall be 200 feet from the shore.
Yeah. I think you misread that, though. It says within 150 feet
From the shoreline, I apologize.
Yeah, and what I heard, if I might, Madam Chair, what I heard is that some of the areas in the smaller lakes with the new regulations would just preclude any activity in those areas, so. But you out there will tell us what you think. I appreciate that.
I do too. So I have the list of folks who had signed in and stated whether they would testify. We'll go through that first, and if there's anybody after I finish this list that would like to testify, please raise your hand. We'll ask that you can only testify once. And I know that sometimes people want to respond to other things that were said, but in order to make sure that we've got an organized and a good process, we'll ask that they only testify once tonight. So first on my list is Susan Freelander. Did you want to still testify? Yes. Thank you.
My name is Susan Friedlander, and I live on Phillips Lake. Lived there permanently for 24 years. We've had a summer home there also. I'm there all the time because I do not work during the summer. The amount of wakes and water during the week is nothing. I could actually go out and float, and no boats would come by me because The amount of boat problems that we're talking about is so minimal that it's not even worth, and especially since nobody really did an environmental study on any of this action, and it would cause our lake to be not a water skiing lake, or it would be very tight. I'm more concerned about the kids driving boats at age 12 than I am how far out. Cars have brakes, boats do not. And you have to be 16 to drive a car. So I just think you guys really need to take a look at that, and also the amount of money that's spent by the out-of-towners, that come on the weekends and spend their money and have redone their homes and added boat lifts and whatever it's a lot. And we don't want to be the county that is pushing everybody away because we need to have 200 feet from shore because our bulkheads. Do we drive on the roads here? Yes. Do we maintain the roads? Yes. Same thing with bulkheads. I don't even live on the main part. I live just on the off, and my bulkhead's going away. But I got to fix it. Oh well. That's what it is from living on a lake. Thank you.
Thank you. Dwayne Freelander, it says to be determined.
Yes, can I defer Pharrell and
Sure.
come in at tail end?
I'll try to remember to call you back up.
Kind of busy right
It's adorable. Sean Wilson.
Thank you, Commissioners, everybody else. My name's Sean Wilson. I have a property on Lost Lake. I come up there pretty much every weekend since we bought it in October. I bought the house solely to be able to bring my kids away from technology and being able to play on the water and enjoy water skiing, tubing, and all the wonderful water sports we have. On Lost Lake and 7 other lakes within Mason County, based on shape and size, this 200-foot increase from 150 actually closes the substantial portion of these lakes for skiing. Now, on Lost Lake, I spend every single weekend working on my cabin. I brought business in, I bring friends in every single weekend and continue to bring money into the county. Yes, I'm one of the out-of-towners. But this is also my second home that I bought as a vacation property in Shelton. I live in Snoqualmie. I'm 45 minutes to Cle Elum. But I choose Shelton because it's home. And my kids know it is home. But more importantly, we sit on the lake, we tube, we water ski, and we have fun. And I bought the house solely, actually emailed my broker, said, hey, can you find me a house on a water ski lake? Not one that I can fish, not one that I can power boat, one that I can water ski on, because I was a water ski instructor. So that's the one element. The other element to this is look at the businesses that these communities and us out-of-towners bring in. So if you think of Bucks Prairie Come and Go, way out, mile marker 13, they triple their inventory as soon as the season starts. And it helps make those businesses continue to grow and thrive when we have the quiet months. And especially with the hardships that Shelton's had, let's continue to bring that same level of economic input into this environment to have other people love it. My final piece to this is if you did this to some of the lakes, Phillips, even Spencer, and Lost Lake, what you do is you actually concentrate the boat traffic based on their shape. And I think you had it from the early June meeting where it showed Dwayne, you did it, right? The breakdown of how much. What it actually does is it constricts the actual amount of traffic within the 2 parts of the lake that makes it actually more dangerous. Updating the regulations to meet the Washington state guidelines for boating, great, let's do it, let's get in alignment. The water ski regulations is not a state mandated, it's one that we have taken as Mason County, and we want to now increase it without an engineering or impact study to what the actual impacts are. Now, some of the other people here are actually going to also talk about the wake skiing, because the proposed language actually excludes a lot of people from actually doing it. And I'll let the wake skiers actually talk to it. Wake surfers, sorry. Not wake skiers, see, don't even know. I want as little wake as possible when I ski, because I cut across it. Anyways, for those of us, and if you look at the demographics of who's on those lakes, it's our second homes for the majority of us. And we come to get away from this and get down to the water. And if it's paddling or it's skiing, that's why we bought and moved to Mason County. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. I'm going to kill this name, sorry. Barbara Terabaccia? Did I happen to get that?
My name is Barbara Tarabocha, and in 1995, my husband and I moved to Lake Cushman, and we lived there ever since. We live on the water. Lake Cushman, those of us who don't know, is about 11 miles long, and from what I'm told from a recent drone that went across the lake and back, it's about 2 miles wide in many places. I believe currently it's 150 feet offshore to go faster than 6 miles an hour, 300 feet from the boat launch. I don't know if there's any language that addresses the structures, but it sounded like there might be something with the new proposal. What we find, and we watch the water skiers and the canoers and people out on floaties, and it's nice that there's this buffer layer in between before where the boats can go faster. But unfortunately, there's a problem with enforcement because there's not police on the lake all the time. There's a bit spotty and on weekends, but you can't count on them being there all the time. There just isn't enough to go around right now. I guess my concern is when people come in and launch, we tell them that there are multiple hidden boat launches on the lake, and the ruling is that you have to be out 300 feet from a boat launch before you go faster than 6 miles an hour. Doesn't seem to faze anybody, so we changed the language when people launch. We said, okay, it's considered reckless endangerment if you go faster than 6 miles an hour if you're within 300 feet of a boat launch, and it's a $400 citation. That started getting people's attention, and they started slowing down. And we would tell them that there are hidden boat launches. There's no markers, and it's difficult to mark them because of the way the lake goes up and down. And so 150 feet out or 300 feet out one week might not be the same the following week or the next month. Then we added, and there's a mandatory court appearance with one of our county judges. That really got people's attention. And things seemed to start calming down, and that was without police enforcement. Unfortunately, with the 300-foot limit on one side of the lake, there is less wave action and erosion and destruction of the shoreline habitat. On the other side of the lake, there are no launches, and so the requirement is only 150 feet over there. I don't know what's happening over there, although I have seen slides. Watching this for the last 25 years and watching the erosion, and you can see it, it's visible, and I invite all of you up to come and look at this. It's very disappointing to see what is happening. The shoreline structures, the erosion that is going on there, getting more and more difficult to get permits for shoreline protection of your property. I want everyone to have a good time, but I don't think one person's good time should spoil someone else's. Boats that are exceeding the speed limit inside or even outside the 300-foot limit. We have canoes that capsize, paddle boats that are swamped. And it's not just disregard for the regulations, but is I'm out my 150 feet, and so I can go faster. I think that the minimum regulation on Lake Cushman should be much greater because of the size of the lake. I think there should be a minimum of 300 feet before going faster than the 5 or 6 miles an hour on the entire shoreline. And if it is wakeboarding, which is a fabulous sport, them catching air, it's magnificent to watch, but the boats need to be out farther. That lake can tolerate that type of activity, but our docks are galloping Gertie when they are within 300 feet of our docks. They'll just be a galloping Gertie, and you watch waves pounding on shore. It's almost like a ferry boat. I don't know if you've seen videos or live action. We had a wakeboard boat that pulled in today, and they said, "What? It's only 300 feet? It should be 300 yards." They themselves were saying that we need to be out farther. And I didn't know that you could do one side or the other. I thought they cast equally on both sides. If it can be one side, that would be very helpful to pull the wake action out into the middle of the lake rather than to the shoreline. But if they're doing both sides, and I don't know if that's possible to do both sides.
Depends on the sport or how you're doing it.
Oh, okay. So if it can be both sides, then there needs to be language to cover that, because it's destroying the shoreline and the dock surfaces. And people are there for the weekend. The damage is done, and they're not paying for it. They're just out having a great time. And we want everybody to have a great time, but not when it costs somebody else something. And let me see if there's anything else on my little list here. Shoreline. I think I got it all. Okay, thanks.
Good job.
Thank you very much. Trish Lord, there was not, did you want to testify? Thank you.
I don't like speaking in public, but
Thank you for doing it.
I live on Phillips Lake. I have 2 homes. My mother-in-law has 1. I have 2. We have one in a very, a cove on one side. We recently, in the last 2 years, bought a house literally on the point. We've got the sharpest point of the lake. With that, we've gotten, I grew up on the lake. You're going to get erosion from years of animals and everything else, but you're going to have to maintain it. That's just the way it is. If you want to live on the lake, that's the problems that you're going to have to deal with when you live there. It's just the way we feel. My husband and I live in Bellevue. We came from Bellevue knowing that the lake is just a gorgeous place. I grew up on the Sound over on Bainbridge, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I love my place. My husband would sell our houses because if this gets changed, then we're going to have a problem, because you're going to lose a lot of money through this county, because there are a lot of people that live here that live out of town, and they would not want to be moving, because that's a lot of money to take over. So, thank you.
Which lake did you say you lived on again? I'm sorry.
Phillips Lake?
Phillips, thank you.
Thank you. Alan Dubeck. Dubeck? Dubeck, thank you.
I'm always due back. My name's Alan Duback. I live on Spencer Lake, and I've got like 5 or 6 comments. One is, could you add Spencer Lake on the 200-foot? But I have questions about the 200-foot. Number one, the 150-foot setback is somewhat reasonable at 6 miles an hour. You push it out to 200 feet, and you up the speed limit to 10. Once you've made a wake of whatever, 1, 2, 3 feet, 50 feet, that wake is not going to dissipate within that extra 50 feet. If you're going to push it out 200, should be 6 miles an hour. Or just leave it 150 feet at 6. It's going to do more damage to my property on Spencer at 10 miles an hour, because at 201 feet, they can go 50. So it's a concern of mine. And Spencer Lake could tolerate a 200-foot setback. But I don't think at 10 miles an hour would be reasonable. As for Phillips Lake, well, I'm not a weekender either. I live there full-time at Spencer. But Phillips Lake is doable at a 200-foot setback, although it's been commented, yes, it'll be much more restrictive. I went onto Google Maps and did some mapping, and like the narrowest parts of the main body are about 750 feet. So a 400-foot setback plus a 100-foot separation between boats, and according to the American Water Ski Association, you need 150 feet at 36 miles an hour to make a turn. That would leave you a 100-foot cushion, which is, like I said, much more restrictive other than a 200-foot cushion. But
How many feet was that for the turn? Because that's one of the issues I brought up last time I'm trying to figure out.
According to the American Water Ski Association, tournament ski boats, now this whole wake ski boat thing, it says 180-degree turn at 36 miles per hour within a 150-foot diameter course.
Thank you.
A couple other comments that you might want to consider as part of this is I accidentally bumped into Jason, the GIS guy here at the county today, because I used to work for the county. And I would propose that you think about getting GIS to get all of the property owners' names that live on the lake. Send them a letter, a basic letter saying, hey, we've made a new regulation. Let's look at the county website link, rather than mailing them a 20-page thing. Say, please take a look at this and review the new boating regulations on the lakes. And my last comment is, how much trouble would it be for the county to make a placard of some sort and say, here are the boating regulations. 150 feet on Phillips Lake, or 200 on Spencer, or whatever. You know, your shoreline setback should be 200 feet. You cannot 6 miles an hour or 10 miles an hour within that zone. Wakeboards or whatever, whatever the ballast would be. But just set out the actual rules of the lake on a billboard as you enter the lake, 300 feet from the boat launch. I didn't know a lot of this stuff, and I've been there 10 years. I think it would be very good to let people know what the rules are as they get on to each individual lake. And of course, the state regulation is 200 feet at 5 miles an hour. I really don't like the 10, but 6, if you're going to go 200, I would prefer 6. So I think that's it. Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Gerard Schaefer.
Hi, I'm Jerry Schaefer. I live on Phillips Lake. I'm in a cove near the Freelanders, actually, but I'm all over the lake, and I am a recreational water sport user. I'm also a legal resident of Mason County. We're here more than half the time. Our other home is in Redmond. My background is I'm a licensed mechanical engineer in the state of Washington, and my business consults in accident investigation and failure analysis. I'm a forensic engineer. So I'm very partial to actually basing things on real physical evidence, not just what we want, how we feel. So with that in mind, I'd like to talk about two main areas here. One is safety, and that's been touched on, and so we can get past that pretty quickly. If you concentrate people in moving vehicles, you decrease safety, period. That should be our paramount concern, not maintenance. Now, engineering. A little background. This is going to make your eyes roll back, but stay with me on this. To do anything, you have to do work. Work is force over distance. So you actually have to be able to do work. Work per unit time is power. So if I move stuff faster, I'm putting out more power. There is no study yet that shows what's doing damage to docks. We all recognize that wind is a natural... Sorry for the people listening there.
Okay, right over there in the corner.
Wind is a natural source of wave energy. Oh, I left out, I'm a Naval Academy graduate. I've driven ships at sea. Waves and pushing boats around is in my core. But docks, a new, well-maintained dock does not have trouble with the wakes encountered on a wave, on a lake, any of our lakes. The shorelines. Building a seawall leads to the energy concentration that damages the shore in front of the seawall. Seawalls do damage to the shore. We all like our seawalls, though, but seawalls need maintenance. Back to the energy and power thing. Without knowing where the energy comes from that damages seawalls and damages docks, it's not reasonable to write a regulation to control that energy. So, to be clear, we know there's wind energy. I think if you did the survey, and clearly no one has, what is the main water use on a small lake in Mason County? Inner tubing. Those little kids will not stop begging to inner tube. Now, inner tubing makes a wave. It makes a wake that changes, because inner tubers don't go straight. I mean, it's boring enough driving one of those guys, but then you got to work, and you can't go straight. So they make a big concentration of waves here, and then they turn, and as you turn, the waves pile up, and you make a big concentration here, and then you turn, and you make it here. So wakeboarders, who are the vast majority of water sports traffic on the lake, sadly, I hate towing those kids. I refuse now. My kids are 17 and 19. But the point is, the amount of energy that's in the lake, the amount of ability to do work, which means to damage docks and to damage seawalls, my guess is it comes mostly from wind, which just happens all the time, and tubers. Now, I'm not saying ban the tubers, and where I'm going with the energy issue is twofold. And I'll get back to distance for waves and dissipation with natural flow in a second. But there's clearly a particular attack here on wake surfers. And it's interesting because the way your regulations are written doesn't consider reality in two ways. One, I see the part in there about thou shalt always go counterclockwise. Well, that means if I want to go 2 doors down to my neighbors who live in Arizona because they're in town this week, I have to go counterclockwise all the way around Phillips Lake. I saw that was still in there. That's absurd. People can say, that's not what it means. That's what it says. It's what the law says. I can only do what it says. When I'm standing there in front of 12 people for something I did grossly wrong, it still says I got to go counterclockwise at all times. And then here's the real big joke with that. For boats that can ballast up asymmetrically, when I'm traveling counterclockwise, which if you refer to the other section is all the time, I have to always travel in my boat, balance it up to the left. That's ridiculous. I shouldn't have to travel around with my ballast filled simply because my boat can. I know that's not the intent of the regulation, but that's how it's written. And then further, with regard to ballasting to the left, I see one of our commissioners is left-handed. Most wake surfers and wakeboarders ride left foot forward. So when you surf left foot forward, you ballast to the left because you want to be facing the wave. It's easier, just like it's easier for you to ride with your left hand. I am what's called goofy-footed. I ride with my right foot forward. You might say, well, switch, ride the left foot forward. And I might say, switch, ride with the right hand. You don't enjoy it? I don't enjoy riding with my left foot forward. I can't do it. I can, but I'm just terrible at it. It's not it's not recreational. Recreation is about having fun. To say that 1/3, I think it's like 37% of the population who ride goofy-footed can't use these lakes like everybody else, it's kind of ridiculous. Sorry, Mr. Lefty, you cannot use your left hand while you're taking notes. It's the rule. That's not reasonable. Finally, with regard to energy, ballasting up on the left side, and the way it's written, and again, part of my quibble with this is how it's written. Okay, I can't ballast up to the right, I will ballast my entire boat. Now you've doubled the amount of energy I'm putting into the water. And roll back, energy is my ability to do damage. The regulations don't stop me from doing that. So I ballast up and I'll throw waves out both sides. Not off to one side, the regulation says I can do that. That's how we got cab over trucks. You said the trucks can only be, not you said, but the law said trucks can only be so long. Get rid of that big snout. Boom, we got cab over trucks. Same thing for wake surfing. And then the final thing with regard to energy and safety both, I agree completely about 10 miles an hour. 100 feet from shore is how far out a swimmer can swim. 150 feet is how close a boat can get. We don't want boats hitting boats, and we really don't want them hitting swimmers, because a swimmer does not have a chance against that spinning knife. We need a cushion. We don't need 150 feet. We need a reasonable cushion, though. And the problem with going to 200 feet and then trying to console people by saying 10 miles an hour is a misconception of people who don't do surfing and wakeboarding. Those are lower speed sports. The way I make a big wake is I go slow. I wakeboard at 9.8 miles an hour. I set a cruise control on my boat. It has a paddle wheel on the bottom and an electronic control that controls the speed of the boat. I don't sit there and do this. No one does really any with a modern boat. I could go wake surfing speeds inside the buoys at 9.8 miles an hour right up to the docks. That's ridiculous. That's the problem with how these are written. I think it's great to consider changing the rules. But I think to do it without an engineering study, factual basis, not our feelings. We bought our place, feelings, I do have feelings, obviously. I care about this. We bought our place 19 years, 6 months ago. We have been here almost every weekend since then. We're now legal permanent residents in Mason County, and we're selling our other house next spring. We love Mason County. Mason County is known for lakes, and I'm going to end on that theme because even though other counties have different regulations, some more, some less, some don't even have lakes to speak of. They don't have lakes, everything is different. That's why it's left to the counties, not the state. So we need to consider how it is in each lake. And yes, I have a vested interest in the value of my property and the value of my recreation on Phillips Lake, but I love it here. And I love it here partly because I can play on the water. And I think to take any portion of that away, and taking away recreational area by taking 50 feet and dry on a 3 mile long, 50-foot wide swath around and taking it away from me, without any real engineering basis, is not well considered. So I would ask you to not change it until there's actually been a study by there's marine engineers, there's people whose lives are dedicated to energy and water and structures. Talk to them. Let's not guess, let's not go with feelings. Let's talk to them and find out what it should be. And I would encourage you not to write regulations that let me just drive around and tear up docks because I'm pissed. Not that I would. But I mean, literally, the way these regs are written, I could totally legally ballast up and drive around that lake right off docks at 9.8 miles an hour. And it would not be good. So I would encourage you not to make final decisions tonight and to really think about why are we taking away the recreational opportunity from the people of this county? What do we hope to gain? Go ahead.
That was a really good testimony, by the way.
Get a little excited too. I do like
You're
talking
good.
about it.
I'd like to ask you a question. So,
Sure.
so you're saying that you would create the right type of wake at 9.8. If that speed limit of being within 100 feet of a swimmer or a permanent structure were reduced to 5, what are your thoughts about that?
Almost nobody surfs below 9. The typical surfing speeds are between about 9 and 13. 13 are the really huge waves. But it's really that small a window because you need to be going a speed the board can keep up with. You're using the boat to push a board sliding across the surface. So I think it's a bad idea to go to 10. And it seems like we're moving them out, let's let them come in faster. But I really care about not killing swimmers. I really do. I think we all should. So I think the lower speed limit is good. Even if you disagree with me and push the distance out, please don't go above 6, because no one can surf at 6.
Okay. Can you tell me whether there's a preference? I'm not sure why it's 6 in here. The difference between 5 miles an hour and 6?
I don't know why they did that. I don't know.
It's an odd number. So
It is. It seems, it might be the 6.
Deputy Dugan's here. Deputy, was it in the state thing already at 6 before?
That was put in there in 1975.
I
do you
wouldn't
know
be
if there was a reason that 6?
It was the typical idle speed for a motor.
Yeah.
I thought there might be something like
idle.
that.
Fair enough.
It's based on weight. It's purely based on weight. But it's been there, it's been in our county ordinance since 1975.
Okay, thank you.
Same thing with the counterclockwise. It's been there since 75.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that's all. Thank
I
you.
appreciate it. You gave us a lot of good information. M. Russell from Tahuya.
She waited patiently. She was one of the first ones in here.
I was the first one on the list.
Yeah.
My name's Mary Russell, and I live on Wooten Lake, and this old lady is going to make it short. I've lived on the lake. I've owned it for 50 years, lived on the lake for 15 years. 2 years ago, a wakeboard boat dislodged my dock that had been there for 30 years. Having said that, people that live on the lake live there so they can swim, fish, jet ski, water ski, paddleboard, kayak, and wakeboard. And it's not up to somebody else to take those pleasures away from those people that live on those lakes. 200 feet on Wooten Lake, if you have to stay away from one of our kayakers, stay away from whatever, it precludes any jet skis, it precludes any ski boats or wakeboard boats. And as far as preventing damaging wakes, that has been in the regulations since Steve Weibarth instituted those. And a fat lot of good. That did me 2 years ago. And I don't care what anybody says, those wakeboard boats are going to do those damage to the shoreline. Given that, I will say that our sheriff's department has done an excellent job of policing around Wooten Lake. But don't you ever think that there are enough sheriffs or snoops behind the rocks to patrol our lakes. It's not going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Art Kidrick, did I get that right? From Tahuya?
Yeah, I'm Rusty Kidrick, and I also live on Wooten Lake. And actually, I've been living there for 40 years now, so I know the area, I know the lake, I know what happens on there. And I will say that one winter storm will do more damage to my bulkhead than all summer of water skiing, wakeboarding, jet skiing, or anything else. I will repair my bulkhead in the fall from when the boat's been out, and by the time spring comes, everything plus more has been damaged by the wind. So changing the distance out from the lake or from the shoreline is going to make no difference whatsoever because you can't stop winter storms. And that's what's doing the damage to the shorelines, not the wakes from the boards. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, please. Appreciate that, and I'm sure everybody has agreements and disagreements. So let's try not to make them public. Jim Reese, I have a TBD and a yes. Mr. Reese?
I'm Jim Reese from Mason Lake, and I've been here before, and I've sent in some earlier documents. I sent a line-by-line comments that I hope you still have. It had some minor points and so on that when it gets around to redoing the ordinance, I'd sure like to see it. Then I sent in a 4-point letter on suggestions and so on, hope that's still there, plus some exhibits on wakeboard wakes. And I think finally I sent a copy, or at least a cover of Wake Surf magazine. And some of the new technology coming out, a 25-foot boat, 65 gallons of fuel, seating 18 people, 5,000 pounds of ballast. I mean, they produce pretty good sized wakes. I'm not advocating not to have wakeboards. I'm just think that, and when I was growing up, 6 miles an hour and no wake within 200 feet of shore or an obstacle was appropriate. And I don't know what distance you'll come up with here, but if whatever the distance is, it needs to be from whatever the obstacle is, be it the dock or a moored boat or a lift or whatever's along the shore, not just the shoreline. Because if you have a 120-foot dock and a 150-foot requirement, then that means you're only 30 feet from the dock when you go by at excess of 6 miles an hour. I know when I was growing up, there was a water skier decapitated on Lake Washington by a diving board. And that's one small incident, but, it happened. All drivers should be using, personal responsibility when they're driving the boat. However, we should have some distance that's off of whatever obstacle it is near the shoreline. I have watched like about a 250-pound person being knocked over by the waves near shore when a big boat went through. I know that there are people on the lake who are concerned about their grandchildren playing in the water when the wake boats go by. I don't have any problem with the waking, it's just that it needs to be kept further out. And if you're going to have wakes that large near the shore, and of course, I have never seen one in winter storms. We've only had the property since about 1955. Never seen a storm as damaging as the large wakes. And I think water ski boat engineers and manufacturers have minimized the wake. That's been their objective, to have the minimum possible wake in the boat they can design. But the wakeboard, those engineers and boat manufacturers are going the other side. They want to make the largest possible wake that they can. It's just that we need to live with that. And in just reading the literature, and there's other wakeboarders here that can address it, the largest wakes coming out of these boats are between as I read, 8 and 11 miles per hour and maybe up to 13 miles an hour. So I think going to anything over the 6 miles an hour is appropriate, or inappropriate. If we're going to have big wakes near shore, then I think we ought to have a streamlined permitting process, a way to reduce fees, somehow to repair and maintain or help to prevent the damage. Wake surfing is vastly different than water skiing. I hope we have a chance to review this ordinance when it gets rewritten. I don't know what's going to happen here, if you're going to pass it tonight with some revision or what, but I'd like to be able to see the final form. Thank you for letting me comment.
Thank you, Mr. Reese. Jim Madden.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for letting me speak for a moment. I sent you a letter. I hope you've had a chance to review it. I want everybody in the room to understand that there are some issues here that everybody's passionate about. I'm passionate about it as well. There are 3 tenets to do with boating laws. Boating regulations were established for 3 reasons, only 3 reasons. Number 1 is public safety. Number 1, beyond any other doubt, public safety, and everybody in this room should be mindful of that and care about that. They should be passionate about that. Okay? The second thing is we have these regulations for public protection of properties, boats, docks, shorelines. All of those things are there for that reason. And no other reason would we have boating laws unless those things didn't exist. Okay? Now the third tenet of that thing is let's get as much recreation to the people as possible, provided that number 1 and number 2 tenet are met. It doesn't do you any good to have a boating regulation that allows you to water ski within 5 foot of the shoreline to run over everybody, right? Make sense? Okay. So please, when we consider these things, everybody take your personal passion off the table and remember safety and personal protections of properties. You have a boat, you don't want it crashed. You have kids, you don't want them run over. Okay? Let's do that first. And now we look at the recreational side of that. What's reasonable for recreation after we take care of those things? So I heard some people testify about studies and wakes and whether or not there's damage caused by wakes. Sorry, wakes cause damage. To what degree? That's up for debate, right? There have been studies on these all over the United States, on all marine waterways and lakes. Okay? Lake Washington has studies. I'm sorry, they exist.
Sir, I don't need to interrupt. Could you address the commission? I know you want to talk to the audience,
Yeah,
but
okay,
address
okay,
the commission,
yes, okay, I'm
because
sorry.
this is a public hearing, so that's...
Okay, I thought I was trying.
No, it doesn't work that way.
Okay, I'm sorry. Commissioner, you're right. Okay. So there are studies available. There are studies, Rich Passage has studies. Lake Washington has studies. Pierce County Lake, American Lake has studies. Most of these things have been brought about by complaints by people about what's the right thing to do with the regulations on their boatings, right? So the 5 to 8 miles an hour, that's almost universal. Somewhere in that range. Sometimes they drop down to 4 in certain areas of Lake Washington. Those things are based on the dynamics of boats. Boats create larger wakes the faster they go, with few exceptions, based on the displacement of the hull and the design of the hull. When you get to 10 miles an hour, above 8 miles an hour, the nose starts to rise, causes 2 problems. Bigger wake, and visibility for the operator goes down because the bow's up. Those are the reason those things exist. 10 miles an hour, I don't agree that 10 miles an hour is a good speed for a couple reasons. 1, the visibility. 2, the wake. And as we've heard from testimony already, at 9.5 miles an hour, you can create a huge wake. So it doesn't make sense to me that we would increase it to 10 miles an hour. I suggest we maintain it somewhere between 5 and 8, like everybody else does in all the other lakes within Washington. So the boating regulations haven't been revised for about 28 years. It's appropriate for the commission to take this up. I agree. Back in 28 years ago, most of these lakes had cabins. or small houses who are used primarily on weekends and recreational uses with cabins. In the last, since I've owned it since 1991, I've noticed a huge change in the dynamics of the lakes. There's many, many more people living on the lakes, larger houses, many, many more boats as a consequence, more paddle boaters, more swimmers, all of them competing primarily for the shoreline areas. That's the distance, standoff distance from the shoreline or an obstacle to the boats. I will say that I'm a proponent of the 200 feet. I like Commissioner Sheldon's idea that if it's not acceptable for some of the smaller lakes, that if they want to have larger wakes and faster boats operate on those small lakes, that's okay. But the larger lakes, like Mason Lake, Lake Cushman, they can take those standoff distances, and we should for the first two tenets of what we talked about. Safety and public destruction of property. With the increased number of people on the lake, I will tell you that when I'm going in and out of my boat slips, or I watch other people going in and out of the boat slips all around the lake, and boats are going by, it's not just the wake of the damage to the shoreline or their docks, it is also the damage to their boats as they try and pull up to a slip, try to get on a boat launch, or anything like that. You need the standoff distance because they come up too fast when they're that close. Let's see what else they want to talk about. Shoreline. So shoreline, another testimony you heard earlier was about, well, if I get these big storms, it causes damage, that's worse than anything you do on a boat, by a boat. I will tell you that the real damage is not by a single incident. It is the compounding of over and over repetitive wakes, storms, etc. Every time you put another boat within close proximity to one of your structures, it causes another little nudge to the integrity of that structure. So, yeah, maybe the storms are worse, but why do I accept that I, as a property owner, have to take those compounding damages? Just a thought. One other thing, I know this is my primary, and everybody's discussion in here is primarily on the speed and the standoff distance. I did see something tonight that I wanted to point out that I had a concern about. On page 3, it has to do with Article 904.035, requirements to operate a motor-driven boat. And item G on that says, any person who has purchased a boat or a vessel within the last 60 days and has a bill of sale in his possession to document sale of purchase. So what that's saying to me is that if I go and buy a boat, let's say I buy a 25-foot boat, 23-foot boat with 300 horsepower, and I don't know a darn thing about how to operate a vessel, rules of the road, I can go operate that for 60 days without any consequences. I would recommend that we strike that particular item off of the list of exceptions for that reason. In summary, in general, I would wish that the commissioners would consider that maintain the 3 tenets. Please maintain safety of the people to the maximum extent possible. Please maintain, prevent people from having damage to their boats, docks, shorelines that live in on the lakes. The people who come in from outside of the county have no stake in this, right? They're here to recreate. They don't have damage to their docks. They don't have the same stakeholders of their kids swimming off the shorelines of their house. So please, please, please consider that. Second is damage. Please maintain the shorelines of our lakes. Keep them beautiful, keep them safe, and please keep our tenants intact.
Thank you. Mind if I ask a question? Mr. Deputy Dugan, are you still available?
He was addressing a question by a citizen.
Okay. I want to ask a question in regards to that.
Yes, Diane, do you know if that's in the state law?
Yeah,
We took it right from there.
right from the RCW.
So it's in the RCW.
Yeah, that's from the RCW.
That you have to, that
So
you
it's
have
not
bill of
ours.
sale.
We've taken a lot of stuff. We just found out from Diane, We found out a section was from the RCW, the section that states, gee, any person who has purchased a boat or vessel within the last 60 days and has a bill of sale in his or her possession to document the date of purchase for being able to operate the boat. That's directly under the RCW. That's
Yes, and that, what that refers to is the RCW requires that you have to have your registration on board at the time of contact and your WN numbers, except for purchase within 60 days, and that
Actually,
covers that
it's
portion.
referring to the following persons are not required to carry a boater education card.
And that's the other.
Okay.
It's also for the registration side
Yeah.
of the house and for the boater's education card.
Thank you very much.
Just
Thank you.
same thing for rentals.
Thank you. Mr. John Egbert.
My points have been addressed, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Josh Cavo from Tacoma, did I get that right? Oh, he was, okay. Mark Tucson?
Hi, my name is Mark Tucson. I live on Island Lake. I've lived there for 50 years. And I was born there, I'll put it that way. Then I bought the house I grew up in from my parents. And I hope you don't change any rules. I can't imagine any setbacks any further than what we have now. I can only talk to Island Lake. A lot of the things people are talking about here are common sense. We have people on Island Lake that have put out buoys that boaters don't go inside of, and you stay a reasonable distance away from them already. So a lot of this can just be dealt with common sense. The bulkhead damage, I'm in the process of rebuilding my bulkhead. It's 50 or 60 years old. It needs to be done. My dock was done 2 years ago. A dock that's 50 years old is going to be tore up by these boats, and that's just the way it is. So I don't have any grudge against the boats. I don't even own one, but I like watching them. 99% of the time the lake is empty. The weekends they fill up 1 or 2 days. So I feel really lucky to be a person that can live on a lake, and I don't feel that putting restrictions on people that come for weekends should be restricted using them, and I'll be sure that the people that bought homes on some of these lakes did not buy them thinking they were going to go out there and tootle around 5 miles an hour. These lakes are, you live on a lake to enjoy it, and all my life, the things we talk about is what we did on that lake as I grew up. And I can't imagine living on a lake where you could go 5 miles an hour. And it would just be useless. So I hope you don't change any of the rules as of right now. I can't imagine any stricter rules. It's just common sense. And you put these rules on, the officers are going to be ran ragged trying to enforce rules that are a homeowner is sitting on the lake thinking it's 200 feet and the boat says it's 150 feet. How do you verify that distance? I mean, these cops are going to be running around chasing ghosts. So I think it'd be just a real headache to enforce the rules. So don't change anything, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pete Replinger, did you want to testify? Ken Potts.
My name's Ken Potts. I live on Phillips Lake. I won't go into the thing where I learned how to kiss Sarah or any of that kind of stuff anymore.
He did that last time.
Well, I did that last time. It was with a girl. Long and short of it, I've been coming to Mason County since, I was trying to figure it out, it was since 1965 that we first started coming here, and then my brother, of course, had a place on Phillips Lake, and then from there it evolved into going to an auction, meeting people, and then going out to Phillips Lake for the lake activities. It used to be great. You take a 6-pack of root beer and some burgers and buns and go meet friends that live there. that switched to, we had to have a house on the lake and get a recreational place in our own county, which everybody thought was pretty weird, but we love Mason County and we love Phillips Lake, so that's where we laid our hat. Addressing the Wooten Lake lady with the winter damage control, she's absolutely correct. The majority of the time that I see, as far as there's winter damage that I've noticed and whatnot, but not to the extent that she did, but it seems like I am positioned on the lake that I can see the majority of it. I can see all the way to the boat launch. I can see across the open area. It goes to, I can see the mountains. Really cool. But there's not that much activity. It goes back to Island Lake. So majority of the time, there's not that much activity Monday through Friday. In fact, we talk about having a private lake once Sunday around 3 o'clock. We have a private lake, and we're literally out there by ourselves. I don't own one of the fancy boats that can wave to the left or right. I have friends that have those. Can't afford those. But we tend to ballast it either way. I'll admit it right now, I'm a goofy footer. I have to have the wave going towards the shore. A lot of times we're the only boat in the pond, we'll move it to the center. If I'm driving, I move to the center. I cannot vouch for anybody else, but we'll try to do that. I will specifically. I guess I should just address me, because last time somebody got pretty upset about that. That being said, the other point I wanted to make was I liked Commissioner Sheldon's idea about the bigger lakes, maybe can handle it more. Just soon say with the 150, just from the law enforcement end, it'd be easy. 150, 150, 150, 150. The deterioration of docks and whatnot that are caused by boats, I don't have an engineering background. I do know that there was a dock on our lake that was way in the cove. It was not hit by waves. It was not hit by anything other than age. A few of us got together and decided that, in fact, even I think it went to the county, that if they didn't remove it by July 1st or some date, that the lady was going to be fined. Exponentially, something that she could not afford. So we got together, dragged it across, took it apart bit by bit, and did that for her so she would not get the fine. It wasn't by boat. It wasn't by boat waves that caused the damage. It was surely age. So some of the docks that are getting damaged, it's surely age, I believe. Again, no engineering background. So I'd vote that we keep everything at 150.
Thank you, Mr. Rance. Dave Mortensen.
I'm Dave Mortensen, and I live on Spencer Lake. And prior to Spencer Lake, I lived on Island Lake. So from about 12 years old on, I've lived on water. I think what you need to do is look at what's driving the industry right now, and it's wakeboarding boats. When I was a kid, it was ski boats. So ski boats were tremendously different. Everybody wanted the smallest wake as possible. Now it's the biggest wake possible. You're not going to change that, because that's what's driving the industry now. In my opinion, and I'm not an engineer, but from what I physically see, 50 feet is not going to make a difference. And besides, putting a speed limit, when I drive my Mastercraft 190, it's a ski boat. 10 miles an hour is going to make a little wake. Okay? You get into a great big X9 Mastercraft that's designed to make wakes, or a Malibu or whatever that's in it. It doesn't matter how far you're out. A bigger boat's going to make a bigger wake, and when it's designed to make a big wake, even if you're clear out in the middle of the lake, that wake is going to come in. So speed does not really is not an issue. Putting in a speed limit is silly, in my opinion. Living on the lake, I just rebuilt my bulkhead. Okay? Spent a whole week, but I don't care. I don't want you to change anything. It's part of living on the lake. Okay? I have my boat on a boat lift, so it doesn't get tossed around. Okay? Because I know this is not going to change. Industry people want to wake surf, they want to wakeboard, and that creates big waves. So I have to adjust and just keep my property safe and to keep my shoreline from washing away. So I guess I have the same opinion as Mark here. I don't want you to change anything. I don't want you to tell me that, or anybody that, because it doesn't make sense. One boat, a small boat, 10 miles an hour. Gigantic boat, 10 miles an hour. It's completely different. Okay? And whether it's 150 or 200, it doesn't make any difference. It doesn't. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dean Brown.
That's Bo Brown.
Oh, Bo, I'm sorry. Boy, you were last. You're patient.
Okay, so I took some notes earlier, then I heard a lot, so I'm going to try to capture what I wanted to say and hopefully answer some of the other questions along the way. I live on Phillips Lake. I was going to say I'm an off-laker or a second homer, but I prefer to think I have two homes.
You addressed it to us.
Oh, sorry, yeah, my bad.
It's a public hearing, and
Yeah.
I'm kind of a stickler for rules, I'm sorry, but it helps the flow of things. Go ahead.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm out there every weekend, and I get a week coming up here, so I'm excited to be out here for a full week. But we moved out there with our family to enjoy water sports, all sorts. I've got kids. I pull the tubes. My family likes to surf. We like to wakeboard. I used to like to wakeboard larger, but I broke myself, so now I'm hoping to do more surfing so that I can do the lower impact sports because it's easier on my older body. With that, first off, I want to say thank you guys. So I was here last time. You guys heard what we had to say and have come back with some ideas on it. Things that I'm on Phillips Lake, I have no problem with the recommendation because I think you heard what I had to say last time. I don't need to go into a full depth of it, which was we like to have recreation on our lake, and we feel that this would shut it down. Running some of the numbers against the offsets and safe distances. For any sport that would have a long tow line on it, I can go through the math, but it's getting late and I don't want to. You'd pretty much be able to use one side of the lake and then have to putt back up the other side or not be able to ski appropriately off each side of the boat or wakeboard off each side of the boat. So I appreciate you guys coming up with ideas to help us be able to utilize our lake because that's what we want. We don't want to damage anything. Absolutely want to make sure that we have a safe lake. So thank you for, therefore I do kind of like the recommendation of taking these smaller lakes and separating them. As far as the speed goes, once we're inside the buoy line, I personally would have no concern with it being down there in the 5 or 6. It doesn't matter to me. Because if somebody comes inside of my buoy line when my kids are swimming, I want it to be just as slow as anyone else in this room. So I think that the slower regulations in there are just fine, as long as we can still use the lake for recreation and keep it safe where we're at. Just kind of a clerical thing going through here. Just trying to note all the things that I wanted to talk about. In 9.04.130, you guys don't need to look it up, look it up real quick. It says speed regulation, which is the 200 feet from shore at speed is what my crib notes were. But that was the recommendation that we move 200 feet off before we start essentially having the boats work at speed. Then also at 9.04.135, that was specifically addressing water skiing at 200 feet. And then also at 9.04.235, there was another one that says we can move our marker buoys out to 100 feet. I personally would suggest that we don't do any of those, but any of the changes we make, I want to make sure that we don't leave one of them in accidentally, because if the buoys are out 200 feet and we're allowed to then do our water sports in at 150, it's still going to cause a little bit of a mess or vice versa. So just wanted to note in there that I would propose that we not do them because it would restrict the water sports off our lake, but that we keep everything clean and we move them all at once. The other point, the 9.04.137, the wake surfing, essentially the intent of the statement there was, what if we only loaded our boats on the inside lake so that the energy is going inside? It's great in theory. It would work for me because I ride on that side of the boat, but the way the system works is you load the boat one side or the other based off of whichever natural ability the rider has, kind of the right hand, left hand thing. I ride to the inside so it wouldn't hurt me. My wife rides to the inside, my oldest son, but my youngest son, who's getting into the sport, would ride to the outside. So I could never allow him to ride on our lake with us because I don't think I could teach a kid to do something that's backwards to them. It's not natural. So I have a concern with that because that would exclude it. And as far as how the mechanics work, because I know that the question had come up earlier. So when you surf, you're going to go one side or the other, but if you wakeboard and I want to say now younger and or better, because it was for me younger, I wasn't better, but you would load the boat evenly and down and try to create a big wake on both sides. So that's the way the dynamics of the sports, if you want to throw.
And that's wakeboarding.
That was wakeboarding. So that's
Not the surfing.
a long line, you go back and forth and jump barge. So different dynamics, but for the effect that we're talking about, that's the way that the system works. And to fully utilize all the different sports, that's how you need to set up your equipment. The other one I had was around if it was narrow, it goes back to the safety. We're going to be pushing all of that speed activity into a narrow area. I think it's been covered, but I just wanted to bring it up. That was one of my talking points, is we like to we have a small lake, so we try to make sure that we're as far away from everyone as possible. And I know that that's the intent of several of the statements in here, was to try to make sure that that happens. We also agree with that. We try to stay as far away from everyone or every other boat as possible. But by forcing us in, that's actually going to create a negative result because we're all going to be on top of each other just to stay within the zone. So I believe that that's all I had as far as some of my bullet notes that I saw out of here, other than, like I said, to answer your questions, I think that a compromise in which we looked at each lake different. There are different dynamics. I can't speak to the other lakes, so I'm not going to. But on Phillips Lake, the dynamic for us is to be able to have the water sports in there. And I guess I did have one more point, sorry. Is I'm also a landowner on it. I have a bulkhead. So I have a bulkhead in the narrow straight part. So the best part to use best part of the lake to do a water sport, I have a bulkhead right in the middle of it. So essentially anyone coming from the dock or using the lake for water sport, tubing, surfing, wakeboarding, skiing, any of that, that energy is going to hit my bulkhead. My own energy hits that bulkhead. I treat that as a cost of ownership. At some point, my roof is going to go. It's my responsibility to change the roof. If my bulkhead goes, it's my responsibility to change my bulkhead and or maintain it if I can help prevent it. So I do have a vested interest on both sides, in the sport and in the land ownership, and that was a decision that I happily made to be able to spend as much time as I can on the lake. Because my other house doesn't have that problem, but it doesn't have a lake either. So that's why I leave it every Thursday night or Friday night, depending on my work schedule, and come running out here so that we can continue to utilize this awesome environment. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Is there anybody, that's all I have on my list. Is there anybody who did not get a chance to testify that would like to testify? Oh, I got to come back to you. I'm sorry. Mr. Friedlander.
I'm Dwayne Friedlander, Phillips Lake. Hey, more just a couple of questions or maybe clarifications on Commissioner Sheldon's recommended changes. You're looking at 150 for the small lakes, 200 for the larger lakes.
For two lakes.
For the two lakes. I would
Fishman and
want to wonder if the guys like this guy back here, if it would be easier, if everything was more uniform, you didn't have, what would happen with the saltwater? Is that wrapped into either of those and or that as well, or is this a different?
300.
It's 300? Okay, so it's completely different. The other question I have about how this is presented is the buoy, or the distance, 150 or 200 feet, is off of the shoreline or off of, how do you determine where that goes?
Shoreline.
Okay, because if somebody's got a 100-foot dock that you really don't need a 100-foot dock for, you're going out another 150 feet, that's a distance.
And then 100 feet from a permanent structure.
Yes.
Or a swimmer.
Okay. That's it? That's all I got.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anybody else who did not testify would like to?
There was actually, my neighbor wanted to submit, but she couldn't be here.
Okay. Did you only have one
Did you want to
copy?
read it? I've got a copy for myself. Actually, do you have a copy
Yeah,
as well?
I have a
I've got 3 copies for them.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
From Ron and Margot.
Oh, I think we got there.
I just wanted to make sure that you got it and that it's
Oh, yeah, we've
Okay.
gotten their
Yeah.
testimony earlier. Thank you, though.
Thank you.
And let the autos know that we did get it.
Okay, thank you.
By email.
They're at Adele's
Okay.
concert.
Lucky thing.
Concert or public meeting?
What do they think? What do they think?
Okay, so there's nobody else who would like to testify? Ma'am, please state your name.
I'm Barb Gelsleichter. I live on Phillips Lake, and I just have a couple of quick, please keep the number one priority in mind, which is safety. And number two, the wake surfing is not the only recreation on the lake. It knocks over the little kids. There's a gap this far between our shore and where our dock starts now, that we've had to bridge because of the wake coming up and washing out the shore. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to testify? I will close public testimony and ask for commissioner deliberations.
Last week, when we first brought this up, for those of you that weren't here, I had actually asked that we go ahead and pass it, bringing it back to the 150 feet. And at the time we didn't go through with that, but I want you to understand that your commissioners did hear everything you said. Myself and Commissioner Jeffries, Commissioner Sheldon was unavailable at that time, did meet for a briefing, and we specifically put in the paperwork differently, bringing the shoreline distance back down to 150 feet for this purpose of this discussion. So that's the way it was set up. But we also had, I had conversations with a citizen that convinced me that we had to also have a distance from the permanent structures. We just couldn't leave that left out, so that's where that 100 feet came in. The 10 feet, I'm not sure why we're bantering back and forth. It's going to have to make things realistic. I would like to see us go back to the original now that we understand there was a purpose for it and everything. That one there was literally, I think, innocence of us trying to go through it. Some of the points I pointed out of why we need to be at the 150 feet is the loss of property value. I'm a realtor. People don't understand the absolute loss of property value if a lake changes from a ski lake to a non-ski, or even worse, a non-motorized lake. The property values plummet for those poor people, and they don't even know what's going on. So that's a big thing when we're talking about it. But also, the prosecuting attorney whispered in my ear the last time, and I had to agree. At this point, we have no science that says that 50 feet makes that difference on that shoreline. So with that, we'd be just being arbitrary and just throwing out a number. So that's another reason why the last time I was not in favor of the 200 feet. I love the idea of streamlining the shoreline permits. If there's any way we can do it, I definitely want to find a way to do that, to be able to fix it. The buoy situation, from what I'm reading, that was already in the law. That's not something we've added. It's not a red line area. That was already in, or that was already in. That's not something that we were redlining and adding in or changing.
The distance would change if you changed the distance.
You changed it from 150 to 200?
Yeah, see.
In the proposal.
Yeah, but we went back to the 150 with everything.
No.
None of this is, all of this is still
Yeah.
sitting at 200.
Yeah, and in our meeting, in our briefing, we went back to 150 with everything. As a commission, we were talking. We dialed it back to 150 except for the 100 feet from a structure. But again, I would like to see us do a little change back to the 6 miles per hour for some, and the 8 miles per hour is just for after dusk. It's the only speed limit that actually occurs. The other isn't a speed limit; it's a speed limit within the distance within the buoy, which is a big. Yes.
There should be a speed limit in there, 50 on freshwater bodies.
Yeah. So.
For daytime and then.
Yeah. So the 10 miles per hour though is just, or the 6 miles per hour is just within the distance. With that being said, I also like the idea of a plaque. We should put some of those rules and regulations out there for people to see. I'd like to have more discussions on whether or not to have Mason Lake and Lake Cushman, having differences for different lakes. But I wanted to point out something else that the commission had discussed, and that was Chief Sperling had an idea of which we had discussion and we liked it, but the way it's written is a little different than what I thought we had discussed. The way it's written is if a boat is equipped with wake surfing or has a ballast system that displaces the wake to one side of the boat, the operator shall displace the wake away from the shore while traveling counterclockwise. I thought that was supposed to read if within 200 feet. So literally, that's where a little bit of protection comes on for those closer lakes. If they want to be within a 200-foot range, that's when they need to make sure the wake is on the other side. Outside the 200-foot range, then it shouldn't make that much, difference because they're already doing it now. That's just a little extra added buffer that would go in. That's what I thought we had discussed. But again, Chief Sperling wasn't there. We asked him he came up with a great idea. We asked him to throw something together, and we appreciate it. But that's our call on what to do if we even do anything with that. But again, for the most part, I do appreciate, and we do have to watch out for the people's safety as well. But unilaterally changing that distance would be devastating to so many different property owners. I just can't see how we can go away with that. But other than that, I also want to point out most of the things that you see are changes in here are already the law. Deputy Dugan did a lot of work, and he came up with this to bring us up to code, or bring us up to standards with the state standards and stuff. And I do want to remind everybody that it isn't just the shoreline damage. The idea of different things with speeds and dangers and stuff came up because of an accident on Mason Lake, it was at one point, which they invited us out to talk. These discussions have started earlier for a lot of other different reasons than just one specific thing. But the wake surfing has become the one we're discussing. But again, so that's where I sit on these. I'd like to see us go back to the standard speed limits as was already set in there since 1978. I like the 150 feet. I like the 100 feet away from any permanent structure to be added as well, as already added. For ourselves, I'd like us to look at what we can do for streamlining those permits and for putting plaques in place. And I'll leave it with that.
Mr. Sheldon?
Well, I really appreciate the public testimony. I learned a lot, and if you aren't involved in those types of water sports, it's a education opportunity right here. I think we need to adopt the state regulations. Obviously, the safety issues are very important. What I heard was I don't want to take away people's recreational opportunities with a change in distance. I think we need to take a look at just the traffic patterns. If you read this literally, all vessels in freshwater lakes shall travel in a counterclockwise pattern at all times. I don't think that's feasible or really going to work. So there's some things there that I think we can improve. And because you have to take it literally when you read it. So it's important, and I appreciate the comments that brought those things out. And then also 9.04-235, shoreline marker buoys. The way I read that, I think lake property owners can place those a farther distance away, 200 feet. I don't know how they could do that. They don't own that property. I mean, it's public, so I think we got to take a look at that.
I'm sorry, what was your concern there?
My concern is that it reads, lake waterfront property owners may place one approximate floating buoy 200 feet from their respective shoreline to mark the minimum water skiing distance on fresh water. Well, I don't think you can do that. I think it's a public body. Yeah. But I think it should be consistent. I mean, if you're going to...
No, back.
Yeah. 150 feet. If you adopt 150 feet...
You shouldn't be out in the water 100 feet.
Yeah. So I think there's some... Right.
So by moving it to 150, you mean from 2?
Yeah.
Or just altogether? Okay, 150. Okay.
But I think there's some things here that we need to address, and Diane and the Deputy Dugan have done a great job of catching a lot of things, and we're starting to catch more and more here, and I think we're getting closer to an ordinance. I wouldn't suggest that we vote on it tonight, though. I think there's things that we need to consider, and each time we've had a hearing, we've I think made some improvements to it.
I would concur with you, Commissioner Sheldon, regarding maybe we should not vote on this tonight. I agree with probably everything you just said. I like the idea of of having a different one, a distance from the shore for Mason Lake and Lake Cushman, but I would like to hear from residents of that community on that proposal. I would agree that, unless there's compelling reason, I'd agree that this counterclockwise requirement on all lakes should probably be removed.
Yeah, maybe it would read, it's suggested, or, you don't want everybody making a crisscross path.
That is,
That's really what it means.
no, there's another section for it, where it says when towing somebody. So this one is just for navigational purposes only, and I'd be interested in hearing that. I would also be in agreement of reducing the speed limits within 100 feet of swimmers and a permanent structure to 5 miles an hour, and going down to 5 miles an hour on all those other situations under the speed regulations section. And then I agree that we would need to then be consistent. If we adopted a 150-foot distance on most of the lakes, that we'd be consistent with the buoys. Because I agree with the gentleman who testified that common sense is what you need here. And the buoys...
One thing, can I say? We live on the lake where we have a public access, and we have an island out in the middle, and people swim from the access out to the island all the time with no buoys, no nothing. So it's just a swimmer.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
But I'm saying if you reduce the speed to 10 miles an hour.
Thank you, sir. So what I'm saying is, if you were to put a buoy out in front of your home, or 2 buoys, or 3 buoys, that would provide at least an indicator to the people in the boats and the people pulling skiers, and it also is evident. I mean, I know, I live on Timber Lake. I see people have fun around the buoys, and I know that common sense you just can't legislate. So at the very least, if you've got the buoys out in front of your homes, you can give that extra measure of protection and evidence to the towers that there's people are swimming, and we don't want you inside these buoy line. So I think that is something that we all need to consider is the buoys when we're considering safety of our
Just a
swimmers.
point, the thing with the
Sir, we've closed public testimony. We're going to leave open. We're probably not going to vote tonight. Please send in any comments afterwards. Thank you. And we just need to keep some order because this could get a little crazy. So I think what I'm hearing is that the audience here needs to hear, I think that there's a lot of strong consideration to not increasing the distance to 150. If that gives you...
To 200.
Or not increasing from 150 to 200. So if that gives anybody, I know that people would like to walk out of here knowing, okay, what did they decide? But there's a lot of changes that would need to happen in the document we have in front of us, and we could definitely miss something if we tried to do all those revisions tonight. Plus, I'd like to hear from Mason Lake and Lake Cushman residents regarding this proposal's pulling them out and having a different distance.
Well, given that, Madam Chair, I would move that we continue the public hearing and leave the subject open to comments, written comments especially from anyone. And if you have anyone of the 2 commissioners has a suggestion for a date.
Ms. Zorin, do you know if August 9th, if there would be an issue with August 9th?
No. I'm out of the office, but I don't know that I would have all the regulations, what you're saying tonight. I'd have to get with Deputy Dugan, so.
Do you think that, okay. Oh, and that's right, you're briefing. Okay.
Yeah, you'd want a briefing too, I would imagine. Before
Yeah, and you'll be gone. Commissioners, August 9th or 16th, maybe?
I won't be here August 9th.
Oh, you won't, okay.
Not that I have to be. I think we're whittling that down here.
Well, there you go, we can't do it.
If you're not here, I think Deputy Dugan is who we want to have here. Commissioner Netherland, do you have a
Well,
preference?
I'll actually be voting against the tabling of it. These people have been coming here now for a second time and leaving their work and their time and their families, and I think we can hammer it out and do it, so that's my opinion.
Yeah,
So,
we don't have to have another public hearing. We could continue it for a decision to be made, and people could make their comments or submit any additional comments in writing or email.
So I would offer August 9th. So you had a motion going, did you?
I did. I would continue it then to August 9th, and our attorney's not here. Can we leave it open for just written and other comments, or do we have to have Diane play attorney in real life?
Sure.
Huh?
Yeah, you can open it just for written comment only if that's how you want to leave the hearing.
Right.
To accept that.
Then people wouldn't have to come, and they'd have an avenue to respond.
So we have it's a big thing for us.
Okay,
Yeah.
ma'am, we know that. Okay.
Seriously.
We know that, ma'am. I need to close the public comment period. of this.
Commissioners, just to keep in mind, if you want to have a revised document available for public to see before you adopt it, that's not very much time.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And if you'd like to have them comment on what they see,
Right.
we'd have to
Oh,
allow for
okay.
them to comment.
Well, then, since nobody seconded the motion yet, anyway, let's extend that and look for a date to extend it to the 9th. If it's too early, which I think it is. And it's kind of hard too because, well, in one sense, people are here because it is the summer, but it takes away from your recreational time as well. We would have another 6 p.m. meeting on Tuesday, August 23rd.
I would concur with that. I would concur with the 23rd.
Commissioner?
I'll be there, I'm always there.
Okay.
All right, I'll make that motion then.
Okay. And I will second that motion. So it's been moved and seconded to table this discussion and this decision until August 23rd. We will keep the public input portion of the public testimony to written only, and there'll be a decision rendered on the 23rd without public testimony allowed during that evening meeting.
Well, I don't know that you can say there will be. That would be prejudging the commission's action.
Okay.
I mean, something comes up.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded that this issue be tabled until August 23rd. We will keep the testimony open for written testimony on August 23rd. Is there any further discussion?
Yes, again, that won't give anybody an opportunity to have discussion. One of the points you made was whether or not we would have discussion from those up in Cushman and Mason Lake in regards to specifically being pulled out for specific change. They would not be given they would not be given the opportunity to testify. I'm sorry. He looks at me. I'm supposed to pay attention to this thing right here. So I just wanted to point that out.
One thing, Commissioner, both of those have pretty strong associations. Maybe we could contact the association and ask them if they would have input. Please make it.
I think that's a good suggestion. Any further discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays?
Nay.
Motion carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for being out here.
Thank you, everybody.
If you have any questions, please wait until the end. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. We sure appreciate your input.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Miss-
Good to see you.
We will make them available as soon as we can, sir. I can't give you an exact date, okay?
If they don't get available until the 21st.
We will make them available as soon as we can, sir. Thank you. I can't give you a date. If we don't make that date, then I will have not given you a proper information. Thank you. We're still in meeting, sir? Yeah.
No elected officials, there's nobody.
Okay, so there are no elected, okay, we'll move on to board reports and calendars. This is for public notice that we will, and who would like to report their calendar first?
I'll go ahead. We had elected officials and directors lunch. I met with somebody in regards to a business that they've been trying to open, going over some of the issues they're having with the building department. But for the most part, they still agree that our building department's doing great. They just don't like some of the rules, but I expressed to them the rules are the rules. It's not that simple, and we can't ask them to break those rules, and they understand. Mason Transit Authority meeting, Chamber Forum, North Mason Park and Ride Work Group for the MTA, North Mason Chamber of Commerce Board Luncheon, Temple Board meeting, Cemetery Board meeting, briefings, North Mason Community Voice, and Board of Health. Next week, a simple one, North Mason Chamber Luncheon, Lions Healthy South Sound, Hood Canal Lodge, Beautification Committee meeting with our director and some people he's bringing in to discuss the sewer. Briefings, Port of Allen meeting, and Left Board.
Commissioner Sheldon?
Sure. Are you ready?
Last week, I attended the elected officials and directors meeting, met with the constituent, Mason Transit Authority Board. I also attended the candidate forum. We had a criminal justice working team, Habitat for Humanity Board, Thurston Mason Behavioral Health Association. I did the all-day tour and visit and drive to the Roosevelt Regional Landfill, and found out that there's methane gas rights.
Yeah.
That the Klickitat County gets money for the gas rights for the methane gas being produced by the landfill. That is just phenomenal to me. We had briefings on Monday. This morning I tried to attend the jail video conferencing issue, but I had an emergency. I had to leave that meeting, so my apologies for
What conference?
the video, the public
Jail.
defense.
Jail. I
public
thought you were
defense
doing initials.
issue.
JLB.
No, okay.
Okay, sorry.
Had a MACECOM meeting this afternoon. We passed our budget, a Board of Health meeting. Tomorrow I will, Community Action Council, and then Mason Matters on Thursday, and then that is it. I've got a light end of the week, and then I will be gone for the week of July 1st, or of August 1st, and back here on August 8th.
Okay, let's see, we had briefings on Monday, the 29th, commission meeting tonight, obviously. I've got a meeting with PUD 3 and PUD 1 here in the next couple days as well. Sheriff's breakfast, I'll be there on Friday, the 29th at 8 o'clock. And I'm going to recognize Randy Bruff, who for his life-saving efforts on Lake Cushman here a couple months ago. I'll be attending one of the judicial hearings on Monday the 1st, and I'm not exactly sure what time it is over in Mason County Court. Commission meeting is August 2nd. I'll be here. There is I'm going to hear Norm Dick speak down in Portland on an issue of the Columbia River on Wednesday the 3rd, and that's from 2 to 5. And I have a meeting with Department of Ecology with Maya Bellin and her the director and her staff about the Shelton sewer issues, and with the mayor and a couple others from his staff, and potentially a meeting with the Medical Association at Alderbrook on that evening from 6 to 8, but I don't know that I can make it. And then we'll be back here on briefings on the 8th. One of the purposes of this exercise going through the calendars is to make sure that we announce meetings that we're both at. So I wondered, were you both at the Mason County Voice meeting?
Oh, thank you. Yes, North Mason Community Voice on Monday night.
Okay. Did you not announce that?
When I'm looking
I
at
announced
this-
that I was being there.
Did I announce that I was going to be there?
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, I don't recall. When I'm looking at my calendar, if it doesn't show through, I don't always get the late 7 o'clock meetings I'm looking at because I'm doing this fast. I don't recall. You could
Okay.
probably go listen to the minutes and find out.
Well, no, I'm not going to go listen to the minutes. I'm just going to say that it's up to the commissioners to always announce in advance in a public method, that they'll be at the same meeting. And if it wasn't announced, then you're in violation of the Open Public Meetings Act. So we could check, but I think it's always important to keep track of that and let the public know.
Thank you. Is there anything else to go before the commission? I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
We're adjourned.